Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. It has been a rough Labor Day weekend in the Trump White House, where officials are absolutely full-out freaking out about Thursday night's report in The Atlantic that Trump had characterized Americans who died in war as losers and suckers. Trump himself has spent the past 4 days repeatedly denying the story, marshaling all kinds of people to come forward to knock it down. He insisted today that, quote, only an animal would say a thing like that. The White House trotted out figures like Sarah Sanders, who we know has lied to reporters multiple times, to claim the report isn't true, because they were there when Trump didn't say the terrible things he allegedly said. I think they're hoping you don't think about that formulation too much. The main problem for the White House here is that the evidence supporting the story is pretty obvious and clear and almost overwhelming to anyone not inside the Trump reality distortion bubble. The Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg reported that Trump canceled a visit to an American military cemetery near Paris back in 2018, partially because he worried his hair would become disheveled in the rain, and partially because he did not respect the American war dead interred there. Quote, in a conversation with senior staff members on the morning of the scheduled visit, Trump said, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." In a separate conversation on the same trip, Trump referred to the more than 1,800 Marines who lost their lives at Belleau Wood as suckers for getting killed. Now, the sources in this story are anonymous, which, anonymous sources are not as good as named sources when you're evaluating something, but it doesn't mean that the claims came in on some anonymous tip line that no one knows who they came from. It means a reporter, in this case Jeffrey Goldberg, spoke to the people directly, interviewed them, and has agreed not to identify them in the story. Jeffrey Goldberg will be here with me to talk about that in just a moment. His initial story has now been confirmed in part or in its entirety by reporters at numerous other media outlets, okay? Remarkably, a correspondent at Fox News included in that lineup, whom Trump promptly called on the network to fire. Some of those corroborating stories included even more damning details about the president, like this one from the Washington Post, quote, the president told senior advisors that he didn't understand why the U.S. government placed such value on finding soldiers missing in action because they had performed poorly and gotten caught and deserved what they got. And this from the New York Times, people familiar with Mr. Trump's private conversations say he has long scorned those who served in Vietnam as being too dumb to have gotten out of it, as he did through a medical diagnosis of bone spurs in his heels. Back in 2019, Trump's former lawyer and fixer Michael Cohen testified that Trump had admitted to faking those bone spurs, telling Cohen, quote, you think I'm stupid, I wasn't going to Vietnam. There's even more evidence that Trump views soldiers as stupid or suckers. Mary Trump, the president's niece, wrote in her recent book that Trump had threatened to disown his eldest son if Don Jr. joined the military. She also says that her own father, Fred Trump Jr., was mocked by Donald Trump because he, Fred Trump Jr., decided to join the U.S. Air National Guard. Quote, my father was frequently ridiculed for his career choices and disparaged for serving our country by both his father and by his brother Donald. Then there's the fact that pretty much none of Trump's top military officials, past and present, are backing the president up. I mean, you really can't find anyone who's stepping forward to defend his character, say he would never say anything like that. They aren't disputing the story. Instead, that's been left to talking heads and former flacks and loyalists. That's maybe not a huge surprise, because what Trump allegedly said about all U.S. service members hews very closely to what he said back in 2015 about one particular veteran, Senator John McCain.
He's not a war hero.
He's a war hero.
He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
And John McCain was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 5.5 years, as everyone knows. Donald Trump avoided that war, had a different experience. In an interview in the 90s, he characterized his efforts to avoid sexually transmitted diseases while sleeping with numerous women as, quote, my personal Vietnam. At an event with union members today, Joe Biden lambasted the president's comments and invoked his own son, Beau, who served in Iraq and then died from a brain tumor in 2015.
Those who have served, risked their lives, even gave their lives to our nation, losers and suckers. These are heroes. I'll tell you something. My Beau wasn't a loser or a sucker. If that's how you talk about our veterans, you have no business being President of the United States of America.
What's being entered into the record here, to take a step back and look at all the evidence about Donald Trump, shocking, sort of morally offensive. It's not surprising. It's about what we have come to expect. But one big question that keeps pulling on my shoulders, why are we learning about this now? What does it mean that we are? For more on that and the fallout from his incredible reporting, I'm joined by Jeffrey Goldberg. He's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. And first, Jeff, maybe I start a little bit with the reaction to this story from the White House. You know, there are stories that come out all the time about the president that are fairly scandalous, incredibly scandalous. And a lot of times they say that's fake news and they swat it away or the news cycle moved on. They do seem particularly freaked out about this reporting and particularly intent on attacking it. What is your sort of reading of the last 3 or 4 days of their reaction?
It's a good question. First thing I would say is that, look, this is not an attack. These are not reports of an attack on, say, immigrants or black people or something like that. Something that we expect from Donald Trump, and something that his base might actually help him with his base. This could hurt him with his base. You know, the second thing is I think there's a lot of nervousness in the White House. And again, you know, I'm not commenting on anything having to do with my sourcing or other reporters sourcing, Fox, Washington Post, whatever. But you know, there's a deep hostility and mistrust in the White House of current and former generals, people who lead the military. We saw that today. Donald Trump did something that I've never seen before. He attacked his own service chiefs. He attacked his own leaders of the armed forces, called them war profiteers. I mean, even in the sort of phantasmagorically weird 2020 race, that's still something. But I think it has to do with the fact that this is the kind of accusation that sounds believable, and also goes directly to a core constituency that Donald Trump obviously needs to keep energized come November.
Yeah, we should note that there's been polling of active duty service members in which he's underwater with them. There's been an interesting sort of officer enlisted split, but he's been losing ground even with enlisted members. He's gone from a net positive of 9 points to a net negative of 12 points. You can see that there. That's the latest Military Times polling. You just mentioned what he said today was pretty remarkable. Briefly sort of like channeling a kind of like left anti-imperialism vis-a-vis his own service chiefs, although it's completely like made up and fabricated because in the next breath he's constantly bragging about how big the Pentagon budget is and how Raytheon is making off like a bandit. But I want to play that clip just to get your response to it. Take a listen to what he said.
I'm not saying the military is in love with me. The soldiers are. The top people in the Pentagon probably aren't, because they want to do nothing but fight wars so that all of those wonderful companies that make the bombs and make the planes and make everything else stay happy. But we're getting out of the endless wars. You know how we're doing.
But here's the thing, Jeff, they're not. This is what drives me insane. We have expanded our footprint. We've expanded bombings in all the theaters of war. This is an absolute con, this idea that the great anti-war Donald Trump has some revolt on his hands from the generals.
Yeah, first of all, as you well know, the generals are usually more hesitant to go to war than, not usually, often more hesitant to go to war than civilian leaders for some obvious reasons. No, this was remarkable. I mean, he's sort of channeling, you know, circa 1965 Bob Dylan lyrics here, as I saw pointed out on social media today. It's quite remarkable, given that tomorrow there's a pretty good chance that he'll brag about how much money he's spending on military hardware. And of course, as you know, he's deeply transactional and loves it when foreign countries buy our military equipment. So if you're looking for consistency in that particular clip, you're looking for it in the wrong place. It doesn't make sense in any kind of traditional understanding of politics.
I want to talk about the sourcing here, and I obviously know they're anonymous sources that you are protecting, and so I don't want to like say, well, was it this person, was it this person? But in a general sense, I had two reactions when I read the piece. One was, well, okay, why didn't you tell us this before, and why not be on the record? whoever you are out there. I mean, this is what you're saying here is very serious stuff. It's an incredible condemnation of the president's character. I think it just his humanity, honestly. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and obviously I push, and obviously I know that other reporters who cover this area are pushing various people to say what's on their minds. I think there's a couple of things. There's this idea of a code that you don't interfere. I think people are torn. On one hand, they don't want to interfere in democratic electoral processes. On the other hand, you're talking about a president who is something unlike they've ever experienced. I think there's also fear. I think, and we see this across the board in Donald Trump's Washington. There's a fear on a kind of a superficial level of a Twitter mob. There's also real fear of personal safety, fear for your family, a fear for what you'd put everybody around you through if you started talking about this sort of thing. And these are people just like other people, and they have this anxiety. It is a reasonable question to ask why people who have had direct exposure to Donald Trump, who know what Donald Trump has said, who know what Donald Trump has done, won't simply come out and say it. And I share that view that it's not good enough. But, like other reporters, I'm always balancing out the moral ambiguities and complications of anonymous sourcing with a public's right to know. I mean, the sources are not anonymous to me. Jennifer Griffin said that from Fox News when she was challenged. And I trust these sources. These are people in the various rooms. And but yeah, obviously it would be better if people would attach their names to what they know.
Final question for you. You said something, I think, over the weekend about there being you expect there will be more reporting in this vein. Obviously, there's been a lot in the aftermath of your story in the Atlantic.
Since I said there's been some.
What do you mean by that?
No, I mean just that. I mean, I know that there are a lot of reporters moving around on this story, people with excellent sources, people who are excellent reporters. And, one of the things that there's this surprising, there's this sort of shocking but not surprising quality to all of this. This discourse that Trump has about soldiers, about the military, is no secret to anyone who's spent any time with him. It's no secret to the military at the highest levels. I just know of reporters who are trying to figure out other aspects of this, and I expect more reporting on this and everything else in the coming couple of months.
All right, Jeffrey Goldberg, who kicked this off with that report in the Atlantic, came out Thursday night. Thanks for taking some time with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.